Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series There Is No Epic Lucha, only puns. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 175, We Have the Technology. Delta watched as Maestro and Farah pushed the hero bots harder than before. Maestro pulling a double duty of fighting and protecting Num and Billy's cocoons of evolution. In the back of her mind, Nu continued to fight against them in a symbolic space, using more devious tactics than Delta had used. The agility hero crushed the glowing cocoons despite Maestro turning the room into a literal storm of blazing bullets and vines. "No!" Delta cried out as the robot raised one of its spider legs to stomp down. In the blink, two glowing eggs were yanked out of range of Maharia, held one in each of her hand with a scowl. "Metal man, what happened to good old flesh and blood?" she complained. "Take them down to the next floor, hide them behind the waterfall," Delta told her quickly, and Maharia began to move. "You sure? These are first-floor monsters. Not sure what will happen if they get more mana in mid-evolution," she said, and Delta didn't hesitate to nod. "Better odd than dead," she said firmly. "This dungeon in a nutshell," Maharia sighed and took off, the hero about to jump at her when Maestro intercepted it with a gain. Their bodies locked in struggle. "A true performer is willing to break a leg," Maestro warned, and all of the mushroom turrets in the room turned to their locked bodies, beginning to fire bullets. "Maestro!" Delta reached out, but the bullets thundered into the center of the room, impacting both Maestro and the hero unit. The barrage didn't stop until a few seconds later, when smoke and dust slowly boomed outwards like a decaying flower. "You think this'll stop me? The proud bard of the Delta dungeon," Maestro called, and the smoke was whipped away as the mushrooms around the room began to twang in notes similar to a stringed instrument. It was a continuous chord intermixed with two heavy thrums. Maestro looked wrecked, his suit in burning pieces and one arm gone, and the hero unit looked thicker in places, producing a near-constant whistle that made the air around it ripple. "It isn't over until the robot screams," Maestro declared, and buried his cane into the head of the hero unit, causing it to pierce clean through. Vera looked around her ruined tavern, mentally taking note of which liquors would need to be replaced. She and the robot had both grown a few inches, but the robot was still the taller beast. She had used all her ammo, all her mixtures, and even experimented with a few drinks, but she had to admit the robot could hold its drink. She slowly pulled herself out of the wrecked bar as the strength unit emerged from the wall, pushing wooden beams out of its way. The only true change the robot had undergone, as far as the massive golden mane of hair it had grown when Farah dunked a Delta surprise drink on its head. Unlike Fran, this hair was clearly held together by dreams and hair clips. "You're a cold one," Farah admitted as she rubbed her lips with the back of her hand. The robot only moved closer. "But you see, unlike you, I don't have ice for blood," she spat and held her hand out. Outside the bar, the third unchanged unit watched the fight without getting involved. Cocky tin can. She opened her hand to reveal a red crystal. "I have fire," she said as she crushed the gem, causing a tiny spark of fire to ignite all across her bar. Smashed bottles glinted as the contents spread across the floor in such volume that they formed a thin waterline across the entire bar. Vera closed her eyes as the second time in so many days. Her bar exploded. Bran better give them hell, or she would bar him for a week. Maestro watched as his cane cracked, huffing to himself in dark amusement. "I guess you don't want to join my fan club," he joked, and the cane shattered. His own form followed suit not long after. Vera has been defeated. Maestro has been defeated. Danger level 7. No loot, no rewards, no retreat. Yatina was rubbing the grass all around her as she scurried out like an insect. "Binding, bonding, interlinked manner of base existence," she exclaimed. Lim tried to shift her, but she was so lost in her sight that she couldn't be moved. Someone stepped in front of her, and she looked up slowly and the long muscled leg of the gargoyle. The muscle continued until she was staring at a blank face. In one eye, he looked like a stoic man monster with wings, but the other eye, her new eye, he was a glowing angel of beautifully constructed life. Thriving, singing, humming life. Tears sprung to her eyes as the angel bent down to be at eye level. There was no spark or attraction, but Yatina wept all the same as if she had been seen an artwork or heard a passionate sonnet. "Don't crush the grass," he intoned, and Yatina blinked. What? She spluttered. Everything is delta. Crush the grass, you crush delta. Don't, he explained. I see, she said, and Lim gaped at her. What? She asked, feeling self-conscious. We should go, he said, and they turned to see Dio emerging from the feast hall with Poppy in tow. The girl looked annoyed and to be disturbed, but since it was Dio, she didn't say anything clearly. Just as they were about to speak, the entire dungeon shook so violently that Yutina was thrown on her rear, and Lim nearly went headfirst into the well, only saved by the gargoyle at the last moment. From the connected kitchen, a spout of fire raged out, burning a perfectly semicircle in the front door. What in the world? Yutina grunted as she stood up. The entire dungeon system was going crazy. Turbulent flashes of orange mingled with flares of deep blue raged like a sea. The gargoyle was looking at the same thing when he spoke. Dark things this way come. You'll need to leave as fast as possible before they reach the second floor, he warned. What dark things? Yutina didn't feel right about this at all, especially those strange voids in the Mana Sea, like deep, hungry nightmares that moved ever closer. Delta wished she could do more, but watching Fran emerge from the side of the boss arena as Captain Fran the Defender instead of his base form, chilling. It turned out his base form had a cap of strength because his only way to become stronger or to threats was to transform entirely. Exponential growth that never ran out was still a bit beyond Delta at that moment. The agility and strength units were trailed by a lone third unevolved unit. The strength unit looked to be radiating heat, leaving scorch marks as it walked. The agility unit had foregone ahead entirely, becoming a round torso with just legs and swords that buzzed harshly. What words could I say to such twisted designs? His tall, ogre-like body rippling with power. Don't try. I've looked into their hearts. There's only pain, Delta said, hands clenched. Then I shall save them from this existence, or perish trying, Fran roared. Bacon, his steed charging at a moment's notice. The clash between Fran and the hero unit sent sand flying everywhere. The strength unit was clearly having an easier time than the agility unit. One of Fran's massive lances lifted and flung the agility unit across the boss room, where it landed on a wall and scuttled along like a nightmarish spider, circling around Fran. The strength unit tried to grapple both lances in an effort to keep Fran pinned, but the massive goblin yelled, veins pulsing in the back neck, as he lifted and then slammed the strength unit down with a bigger explosion of sand. The agility unit moved to the exit, and Delta blinked as she began to employ something similar to Maestro's Sonic Blast, breaking the door down as the strength unit and Fran tussled. Fran managed to aim one of his lances and hurled it with all his might, the air reveling out within a harsh boom of sound as the lance flew forth. Delta winced as the agility unit jumped away and the lance cracked the door off its hinges. Fran hadn't had the time to come to grips with his form's power. The agility unit was gone before Fran could throw his other lance. The strength unit didn't seem interested in leaving as it charged Fran, its feet shifting to something that almost glided through the sandy ground. The unevolved unit followed the agility unit at much slower pace, almost casually walking through the ruined door. The two powerful titans clashed once more, metal against infuriating pig flesh and goblin spite. Vanguard, the word gargoyle stopped before the steps to the third floor, back to the second. As if hearing something, Yutina frowned, but she could see two of the dark, sickening holes in the Mana Sea move closer. We might not make it to the circus in time, he admitted, and Lim tensed up. What's going on? Leo asked, all smiles put aside for a serious frown now. Vanguard was quiet, and Yutina had the strangest feeling that he was hesitating because of her. Fairplay has sent in robotic units called Heroes, he said, his wings covering him with a heavy cloak that obscured some, but not all, of the tension in his shoulders. No, Yutina said instantly. She wasn't exactly calling the monster a liar, but the idea that such things had been let loose in a dungeon with fewer than 10 floors, fewer than 5, was ludicrous, foolish, terrifying. She moved before anyone could catch her. She rushed up the stairs, her heart beating as she ran past the near-still tree that was Wyam. Rushing to your death will accomplish nothing, Wyam said, with a low tone that made Yutina stop for a moment. They're made not to harm people. I can stop them. Stop this stupid madness, she growled back and rushed out of the boss room, knowing fully well that Wyam could have stopped her. The beautiful and warm jungle she had traveled through before had utterly changed. The sun had dipped, and the bird songs had stopped. In the distance, a near-constant buzz droned all around the jungle. Yatina didn't know where the stairs to the second floor were, since she had rushed to the secondary dungeon entrance. In the far distance, a noise like a low groan blared out, and a tree exploded. Something grabbed her, and she turned in surprise to see one of those interesting frog creatures from before that she hadn't had the pleasure to personally inspect. This one looked odd, all garbed in dark cloth, and even their head was obscured by a strange white woman's face that looked demonic with teeth like fangs. "Who are you?" Yatina asked, and the assassin-looking frog tilted its head. "The shadow of the moon," it intoned, voice too flat to give any hints of feminine or masculine traits. "Listen, I need to get close to the units. I need to shut them down," she insisted, and the assassin seemed to think it over. "It's too dangerous," it's decided, and Yatina smacked its arm in frustration. "You don't understand. If it keeps adapting, keeps feeding, it'll explode," she yelled into the far too quiet dungeon. The shadowy frog hesitated. "I can shut them down. I have the authority," she pleaded. In the distance, Lim's voice called to her, and she felt bad leaving him behind, but he was safer back with his friends. Then Yatina was moving, her vision showing the frog was moving them through the vents of steam? Scented steam with a hint of lavender, rose, and a tragic backstory. They arrived shortly at a part of the jungle that Yatina hadn't seen on her tour, a long bridge of sorts where a battle of chaotic proportions was taking place. 3 frogs were fighting off the heavily mutated hero unit. The sight of the machine made Yatina ill, mostly from what her new eye was showing her and the fact that these things had been used at all in a group. To her eye, the hero unit was a bundle of energy like flesh strapped to a singing piece of metal. The song was not of love or purpose, but an insane screeching of something that had lost grip on reality long ago. The largest of the frogs swiped at the 2 fast machine with a large staff, making cleaving attacks that left chips in the bridge. The second frog was much older one that was both commanding the other 2 and performing frankly impressive martial arts for giving its age. The last frog was the most visually interesting, a cloak-covered frog that was holding a hand up, conjuring forth things that were a dungeon but not. They looked like shooting green wisps that emerged from the trees and grass with stout arms and round heads. When the hero unit wandered too close, the frog made a heavy slashing motion with her hand, and the spirit stormed around her like a funnel. The unit clearly didn't like the things, as it outright avoided them at all costs. Yatina stumbled forward, her body being rocked left and right as the battle raged on the big bridge. She watched as the hero unit came within inches of beheading the giant, and she threw her hands up. "On the authority of fair play," she screamed, pouring every bit of outrage into her voice. "I, Captain Yatina, of rank 2, demand that you cease operations," she said, and her voice carried far across the jungle, stilling the sounds of the waterfall, deafening the bees, and ceasing all wind. The spider-like robot shuddered slowly to a crawl, then jerkily twitched its arms. It turned to her slowly. Acknowledged. This unit is shutting down." It droned, unfolded in on herself. There was a few seconds before Yatina let out a shattering sigh. She wasn't sure if that was actually going to work. Yatina moved closer to see that the thing had no head anymore and looked like a demented spider. She was going to have words with whoever unleashed these things when she got back to the surface. There came an odd sound like an air hissing, and the undefended body of the unit bent, then exploded outwards as its core was grasped by a clawed hand extended by steel cord. Yatina saw it pull back in, face frowning in confusion. Why was the claw red? She looked down to see that there where her stomach should be, there was now a sort of hole where a claw had also tried to yank on her too. She stumbled back and could barely watch as an unseen hero unit stepped out of the shadows at the far end of the bridge. Right. She'd been singular when commanding. She had told the destroy unit to shut down. She hadn't said she wanted all units to shut down. How stupid of her. A rookie mistake. She was bleeding out, and all Yatina could think about was how pretty the sky was. What a lovely place to die. Deep inside Yatina's body, a secondary battle of sorts was occurring. Orange motes banged on bones and demanded an increase in red blood cells to account for the loss occurring. The bone marrow didn't respond, as it was bone marrow. This annoyed the mana greatly. There were only 2 things this mana collectively despised, gazebos and lazy bone marrow. It had a moment to think to itself. Her body was just a dungeon that moved, right? Her body really just had a dungeon that took food in and produced stuff that other people wanted. So if it just pretended this body was a dungeon, it stuffed some mana into the bones and demanded red blood cells. It got reddish, orange, brownish ones. It wasn't quite right. But as the mana went to work, the alpha system kicked in and began to assign the excess mana to abilities to prevent mana poisoning. Lungs, it could do better. Now she could hold her breath much longer. The mana looked at her muscles and nudged them a bit for more compact. A mixture of oxygen and mana would skip the pesky mortal limit. Oh, while it was at it, he could turn her liver into proto-steel. It reached into her brain and found there was zero drive to reproduce or seek fleshy pleasures. The mana saw no defect and moved on. And at last, the Delta Seed replacement, one of the few things in this body that was a work of art. He just hooked the body up with maybe twice the average connectors than most people might have for their seeds. It wasn't cheating, it was min-maxing. Now, it would work on the anti-gazebo weaponry. Davina reached down, using her magic to heal the deep wound in the human. She was reacting to it much better than Davina thought she should. She winced as Giant was flung back by a new form, the transformed hero unit that had devoured its kin. It had only gained some of its spider-like features, but it retained its head. Adapted, tainted captain weakness, removed command unit in place. It said with a harsh metallic tone, weakness removed, cause stability at 35%. Error, cannot adapt, it rambled as it moved forward. It pointed its hand at Davina as it formed something like a sonic blaster. Goal remains, reach call, damage call, return, strength unit will return to site soon, will become one, it said, and Davina raised a spirit barrier to protect her, Giant, and Gramps. The Elder Frog grimaced as the shield was torn apart a moment later. Damage? Why? Davina demanded, rage in her voice at the idea. That is the mission, it rumbled. That explains nothing. What logic do you have for doing this? Davina asked, hoping to confuse it. I exist to serve, I have a purpose. I am a tool of the god Error, tool of the fair play. I am their weapon, it said as it charged its cannon once more. Davina covered the human with her body, hoping to at least save her. Aha! Not today! Came the sound of a furious river and power. Davina looked up to see Rail with his fists out, diverting the sound waves with his muscles. What a glorious sight! Davina wouldn't mind nearly dying so much if this happened. New threat, but you are one. I will win, the robot declared as it stomped closer. Rail rubbed his nose with his finger before twirling his trident. You see one, but I see Bob, he countered. Error, element Bob not recognized, it said, and a moment later, the entire bridge erupted upwards as Bob, the giant worm, swallowed the robot whole. Davina, get the guppy back somewhere safe. Me and Bob can't hold back here, he said, as he turned back to the others. Davina began to shake her head. It's powerful, I fear that, she began. But he grinned, and her heart skipped a beat. Don't fear, for I will always be here, he said, and the sun shone down on him, making him almost glow. I'll be back once the human is safe. Do not dare perish on me, or I'll be beyond upset, she warned, and helped the giant to his feet, and let Gramps take the human. Hurry back! I can slow it down, but you have the power to truly defeat it. I can feel it, he said, and Davina moved as she saw Luna setting up traps to slow the robot down if it gone past Rail. Unseen by the frogs, a form stepped out of the shadows to watch the battle with a tilted head. Rennie made motions of taking off visible gloves and rolled his neck. Surely, the Lord of the Rivers wouldn't mind the ringmaster taking a shot. There was something delicious inside that robot that Remy simply had to sample. A sort of in-between life and death energy that made his toes curl. It would be his little midnight snack. End of chapter. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Bitmori, Terran on Air, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Lightsjock, Dragzoon WRE, Lord Azrakal, and Arcadian. Thank you.